in the rock bottom moment when I almost lost my life because of, put too many drugs in my body, what became really clear was I got here because I was lying to myself. It's almost like I was seeking a fake peace when I would take, enough mixture of like marijuana, alcohol, and cocaine. All of them together would create like really pleasant sensations in the body. Afterwards, my mind would feel chaotic, but very temporarily, there was like some semblance of pleasure. It just didn't lead to anything. Like it didn't lead to like the real peace that I was looking for.
And were you able to simulate or mimic that sensation to some degree as you began to discover meditation and exploration of self?
No, I learned something even better. So I learned that my peace is not in any sensation. It's in this very sort of subtle space where I'm not rejecting anything, I'm not suppressing anything, but I'm also not rolling in it. I'm not like letting myself just be taken away by whatever emotion's happening. Instead, there is so much peace in just observing. It's not easy. Sometimes fear comes up, but whatever it is, I can observe this quality of impermanence in the sensation, and that helps in the letting go. And in the letting go and the release of that tension, there's a lot of peace.
Diego, great to be with you.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. Thank you for having me again. It's the last time we spoke, I think, was in 2022. So I'm looking forward to us catching up.
Yes, and you were very gracious. I remember, I think we had a technical error not in our favor, and so you helped us recover some files. So that was nice of you.
Oh, yeah. It was also, I was not in an ideal setting at that time. I remember sitting in my mom's living room, so I wasn't even in the place where I normally was. But yeah,
well,
thank you.
You have a steel trap of a memory there.
Yeah.
So I'm interested in having a conversation around, how we can love better. Congratulations, by the way.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Written another fantastic book. And we share a commonality in terms of, our relationships with our respective others.
Yeah.
Goes back many, many years.
Totally.
And I think I met my wife in college, freshman year in college, and I think you and Sarah met early on. So I'm interested in exploring how we can love better. And also, even though the book isn't specifically about the interrelationship between Buddhism and love, you mention a lot of terminology within the course of the book that, of course, tickles my Buddhist nature.
Oh, absolutely. So, it's definitely the backdrop of everything that I do. And it's interesting because I feel like I try to walk this line of, I don't want to be teaching Buddhism through the books that I'm writing. I feel like it's better learned on the cushion, meditating. But it's undeniable that what I've learned from meditating has impacted the way I see life, the way I interact with reality, and how I show up in my relationship.
Absolutely. I mean, I tend to overlay my spiraitual proclivities on top of virtually every decision that I make in my life, like certainly around politics, for example. I'm, always seeking out the middle way, for example. But, this recognition of impermanence, the recognition of the need to let go or to find the middle path, these are very useful for relationships or really any aspect of life. So.
Yeah, I think that's something that's shocked me about the Buddhist teaching. Like the more deeply I delve into meditating and even like taking time to, look over the suttas, like there are these universal laws that are there, whether you want to call it Buddhism or not, right? Where like everything in the universe is always changing. Like impermanence is just predominant. It's just a law that's there. And if you get attached, your mind is going to feel a lot of tension. If you're going to be grabbing and craving or hating things and, demanding reality to exist in a very specific way, you're going to cause yourself a lot of trouble.
Yeah. And this is where it's dangerous to conflate Buddhism with religion.
Right.
Where really most of the tenets of Buddhism are really just deep reflections or representations of reality.
It's interesting too, because it does, like the Buddhist teaching does have a a big space for morality that's very important, because this the anchoring of morality, where not lying, not killing, not stealing, not taking intoxicants, and so forth, it stabilizes the mind, right? So that you can build concentration and then gain wisdom. But even when you look at the Buddhist teaching, he was really just, I found the way out of suffering. Do you want to learn it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And psychology as much as
I know. That's how I think about it. When I think about the Buddha and his teaching, I'm like, he understood the mind better than any other human in history. And we have a lot of different sort of modalities, but when it comes to the ending of suffering, I've found no other sort of clear way that is that direct.
Yeah. And if you look at some of the central tenets, like just impermanence, for example, yes, you can come to that through revelation or through intuition, but you can also study human biology and open up the hood of your physiology, and all you see is change, right? All you see is atoms experiencing billions upon billions of chemical reactions every millisecond. So
totally.
In many ways, a lot of these metaphysical truths are underwritten by actually just studying physical reality.
It's true. And it's interesting because, like, we all understand change at the intellectual level. Like, we know that they don't stay the same. They're going to change at some point. But there's something very different when you literally practice experiencing change directly, like literally getting to feel the change that's happening in your body. And I've been noticing that more and more, like, as I keep meditating, that all I'm doing is I'm sitting down, I'm closing my eyes, and I'm doing the direct opposite of attachment. I'm just embracing change. And when I think about, like, what is attachment? It's clinging. What's the opposite of that? It's allowing the flow to happen, allowing the change to be there.
Yeah. And does that occur within kind of body scan meditation?
Yeah, the Vipassana practice that I'm in the Ubaken Goenka tradition, and I've really found a home there. But it's just really focused in on the sensations. And really you get like the 4 foundations of mindfulness. You see how the mind changes. You see how everything changes, but anchored in sensations.
Yeah. And that experience of experiencing your body as change, for example, really, it does seem to violate some intuition of Diego or Jeff as a stable, reliable self.
For sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Kind of underwritten often by kind of a psychological and physiological continuity, more or less. It's like Diego woke up this morning, he looked at himself in the mirror, he looks more or less the same, he's more or less having the same thoughts. We're anchored to this sense of self through this degree of continuity, but then, of course, when you experience yourself as change, that idea begins to dissipate a bit.
It does, and it loosens the attachment to having a static sense of identity. I've appreciated that so much because it's just honestly given me freedom to grow, freedom to recognize mistakes, freedom to like sort of much more intentionally design who I am. And it's something that I really love from Lady Sayadaw's teaching. So Lady Sayadaw is sort of the precursor of this, when you think about like the mindfulness movement, you can go all the way back to the early 1900s in Burma, where there was this monk he was the first monk to give the teaching to a lay person and then allow this lay person, Sayatet, to start teaching, like gave him the ability to start teaching. And what's one of the powerful things that he said is like, if you say I exist, you're not lying. If you say I don't exist, you're not lying. And these two truths exist together, right? They're not in competition of each other. They don't stop each other, but both things are just true. It's like, Diego and Jeff are having a conversation, but when I close my eyes, I can feel how my body is just a giant series of vibrations. It's just all vibrating so quickly. And if I were to say, oh, is this vibration Diego or is that vibration Diego, it would already be gone, right? So it's like, is anything fundamentally there? No. But there is, quick movement happening.
Yeah. And this being able to hold these two opposing thoughts is paradoxical, but useful for just moving through life, right? So, to recognize the absence of self is key to compassion or liberation or even enlightenment, if we want to go that far. And yet at the same time, there is a self as it pertains to kind of biography or history. Like we were at an event last night.
Right.
This massive 7 octillion self-assembled atoms who was more or less, barriered by my skin within a physical environment, and I was listening to you on the stage, and so there is a self that we can put into those brackets, right? But as we look kind of deeper into our physiology and psychology, that attachment to the symbol of self as the ego, that seems really to be illusory.
Yeah, I think that's what I've learned, is that the self that we are interacting through every day is really just like a momentary combination of physical and mental phenomena.
Right.
Moving at incredibly rapid speeds. It's moving so fast that it makes this like illusion of I. But when you sort of step outside of the static framework that we live in and just literally close your eyes and start feeling what's happening within, you get a subset of the universe within the framework of the body. And when you study that, you start learning these universal laws. And the most apparent law is that truth of impermanence. You start literally feeling how everything is changing. And over time, that will just sort of, it'll fruit into this deeper understanding of like, oh, if I try to hang on to things, I'm going to suffer. And also, if everything's always changing, what I am is more so a flowing river as opposed to a static sense of self.
Yes. And we can swim with that current or not. Well, I think this is good. This lays sort of the compost for this conversation. As we begin to approach the concept of love and how we love better. Certainly that idea of love is most predominantly applied to relational love.
Right.
But I think it would be actually helpful, before we actually talk about that, for you to maybe help the audience, or for people who aren't familiar with your story, to talk really about the importance of self-love or self-awareness. And whether or not that's actually a prerequisite for relational love.
Yeah, I think especially when we're dealing with the conventional reality, like self-love is such a good starting point. I think for my own journey, I was born in Ecuador. My family, my mom and dad decided to move all of us to Boston, Massachusetts, 1992. And we were growing up in a lot of poverty. And my mom, she worked cleaning houses. My dad worked at a supermarket. And they were very hardworking people, both very intelligent, but we were stuck in a very classic American poverty trap. Now, I was a young child. So growing up in that, seeing my parents constantly fight about how they're going to pay the rent, seeing my parents, struggle to put food in the fridge, and living through that imprinted so many patterns inside of me, my own reactive patterns, but they were sort of coming in through the conditioning that I was in. And so much sadness, so much anxiety, a scarcity mindset, it really built up over time. And I had no way to approach the inner worlds. Like, therapy wasn't popular or accessible yet. This was very, obviously, 90s to the early 2000s, very pre-wellness. I didn't know anybody who meditated. So my only solution was to ignore what I was feeling. And if it got too intense, to start running away from it. So that led me into my college days, where I started drinking and smoking and doing drugs to just get away from myself as fast as possible. So I was doing the total opposite of self-love, which led me to just crashing, full rock bottom. And in the rock bottom moment when I almost lost my life because of, I put too many drugs in my body, what became really clear was I got here because I was lying to myself. Like, I didn't want to just admit the simple truth of, I don't feel good. And that's what really sort of woke up the self-love journey for me to pay attention to my habits, for me to pay attention to my emotions, and to just, start intentionally crafting my life as opposed to just being passive and reactive.
Yeah. Do you feel like the drugs and alcohol were a maladaptive choice, but still an indication of a connection that you were actually seeking, but you were just actually making inappropriate decisions?
Yeah, I think so. I was seeking a connection, like, it's almost like I was seeking a fake peace, because I remember the sensations very crisply where, when I would take, enough mixture of like marijuana and alcohol and cocaine, all of them together would create like really pleasant sensations in the body.
Right.
And afterwards, my mind would feel chaotic. But very temporarily, there was like some semblance of pleasure, and it just didn't lead to anything. Like, it didn't lead to like the real peace that I was looking for. But I think that I was definitely searching for a very specific sensation.
Yeah. And were you able to simulate or mimic that sensation to some degree as you began to discover meditation and exploration of self?
No, I learned something even better. So I learned that my peace is not in any sensation. It's in this very sort of subtle space where I'm not rejecting anything, I'm not suppressing anything, but I'm also not rolling in it. I'm not like letting myself just be taken away by whatever emotion's happening. Instead, there is so much peace in just observing, like literally just observing what's happening inside. And whether what I'm observing, sometimes like what I'm feeling when I'm meditating, it's not easy. Sometimes fear comes up, sometimes, sometimes very like strong piti or pleasantness will come up. But whatever it is, I can observe this quality of impermanence in the sensation, and that helps in the letting go. And in the letting go and the release of that tension, there's a lot of peace. Yeah.
So it sounds like this period when you got clean was characterized by a degree of honesty with yourself.
Totally.
With acceptance, with a degree of compassion for yourself.
Totally.
How did that emerge? Because I think for many people who are struggling with myriad addiction, the other side seems slightly like so far away.
So far away, yeah. I think, and I don't know if this is a popular answer or not, but it's just my truth, so I'm just gonna say it. I remember when I was on the floor and I was almost, I was like in between life and death. Like, I had really pushed my body to the edge. This was the summer of 2011. But I knew really clearly that if I wanted to live a new life, I needed to just do the opposite of everything that I was doing. So what got me there was lying to myself. So I have to tell myself the truth. What also got me there was taking all these drugs. I had to put away the hard drugs. And I could feel how weak my body was. So my mind was like, I have to make my body stronger. And so I put the hard drugs away. I started paying attention to my emotions, and I started going on walks. That was like the big thing. I started going on walks, and the walks became hikes, and the hikes eventually became signing up to a gym. So it was like these tiny little things to just like make myself mentally and physically stronger. Yeah.
So you're able to wind up positive habits.
Totally. I think that so when I think of self-love, I break it down into what you were saying. So that radical honesty with yourself, acceptance, because you don't want to just go in there into the, your inner forest. You don't want to just start hating yourself, because you're going to see a lot of things you like and a lot of things you don't like. So it's best to just accept, like, this is the reality of the story. And then positive habit building. Like, what are you missing? What can you add to your life?
So then you meet Sarah. And how do you begin to apply some of those same principles of self-acceptance and self-love to relationship?
Yeah. Well, the fun part is that
it's more complicated.
Yeah, the fun part is that I met Sarah before. So like when we got together in she was a freshman and I was a sophomore.
Okay.
And that was when I like really just started doing drugs.
Okay.
And it became worse and worse over time as we were together. And so she saw all of my darkest moments. And even though she was sort of like way more under control, was living her own life and her own journey, and we were together, she had no control over me. And, I was just sort of going through this story. But what was interesting was that she saw that big change happen, and she saw how much I was committing to life, how much I was committing to like trying to open up a new chapter. And I think it made her really excited. She was like looking forward to this. She was looking forward to us sort of starting fresh. And I think in that beginning part, I was so focused on the self-love aspect where our relationship was basically the same. But what really started waking me up to the truth of how I could be better in relationship was when I started meditating a year later. So it was almost like a year of self-love. We were still together. And I was really just like fixing myself, making myself stronger, practicing not doing drugs, and just like trying to build this new chapter. And then literally a year after the rock bottom moment, I did my first silent 10-day retreat. And that's when, I go into the retreat for healing. And I knew that I still needed to sort of remove this heavy weight in my mind. But I was shocked when at the end of the retreat, I learned so much about how I was causing difficulty in the relationship, how much I needed to let go, how much I, could be more selfless and more loving. And I was really surprised by that.
Mm. So what was that first 10-day Vipassana like for you?
Oh, so hard. So hard. That one's really like printed in the memory. It was really, really hard after spending a lifetime of avoiding yourself and also just the conditioning of society, televisions and cell phones and all that, to just be with yourself. And for an extended period of time, we would have these Vipassana retreats. They're totally silent. You're there meditating with other people in a course, but you're not really making eye contact with anyone. You're not communicating with anyone in any way. You're meditating anywhere from, 5-6 hours a day to 11 hours a day maximum. And it's a lot of time to just be with whatever is, because sometimes what is there is quite challenging.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking like wanting to leave the whole time up until like day 8,
Yes, which is for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, what can be revealed under the microscope of the mind is how much suffering is self-inflicted. Mm. And I don't in any way mean to undervalue, neglect or abuse or racism. Obviously, there's other forms of suffering that are heaped upon us. But when you really begin to examine the nature of suffering, it is so often a result of phantoms of our own projection, right?
Totally.
And I assume that this was one of the revelations that you had.
I think it was made so crystal clear how I cause so many of my own problems. And simply because of a lack of flexibility and a lack of being open to, newness and being open to like just different possibilities. Right. And also, going to what you were saying, it became really clear how easily the mind can pick up a problem of the past and just use it to generate tension, to just literally generate more and more tension. And, it's so interesting because now I've spent a lot of time meditating, right? And I've done a lot of 10-day retreats. I've done 20-day, 30 days, 45 days. And so I spent a lot of time with myself, in the darkness. And I've seen all of my memories. I've seen all of them. And a lot of different things will, they will come up in retreats, and they'll come up as emotions. Some fear will come up, some anxiety will come up. And often it comes up without a narrative, but it will try to grab a narrative. It will try to like pick up something from long ago and connect itself to like, oh, is this like in relation to my brother or my sister or my mom? And then I'm there and I'm observing and I'm like, no, I'm like, it's just tension that's arising. I'm like, it's trying to create a story. It's trying to create some deeper meaning so I can focus on it even more. But it's
so interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so interesting to actually be able to witness that phenomenon. Because we just weave up these stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves, and then they essentially become our reality. And you're right. I mean, so often they tend to have their root in something that happened in the past. And then we project that feeling into the future. I think Daniel Kahneman has this phrase like, we're making negative anticipated memories.
Totally. That's a good one.
It's good, right?
Yeah.
Where, it's not even happened yet, nor is it really truly a reality.
Yeah.
Yet we're already creating something to be anxious about. And a lot of our anxiety is not about the thing itself. It's actually about the anxiousness. So we're actually anxious about something that is making us anxious. It's quite twisted. So as you're kind of unwinding a lot of these psychological pathologies, how are then you able to apply some of these learnings to bettering your relationship with Sarah?
A few ways. I think a lot of it is doubling down on basics. I mean, there's like, three key things that I sort of anchor in how to love better. There's the concept of kindness, compassion, and growth. And with kindness, whomever you are in proximity to, whether that's your roommate, your, family members, or your partner, they're going to see the best of you and the worst of you. Part of that is because of some degree of vulnerability. And that's really valuable. You want to be able to show people, the heaviness that you're carrying sometimes. But something that happens with long-term relationships is that it's really easy to get into a rut where you're just, are always complaining and forget to intentionally bring in the sweetness of a relationship to like balance it out. So I think, especially in the long run, bringing in and moving with kindness, because you don't always know, sometimes you're both working and you're both coming home. You don't know what your partner went through, or you don't know like how, what struggles they may be carrying that day in their mind. So trying to approach them with a certain degree of kindness while maintaining your honesty, I think is really valuable. There's also the concept of compassion, where it's a very specific type of compassion. It's literally the ability to step outside of your perspective to see the perspective of another. Now, if you look at any style of argument solution, that specific type of compassion is needed. Like you need to be able to see outside of your perspective to be able to come to a resolution. And I think that's like one of the clearest ways that you can love a person. And then the last part is growth, where if you enter a relationship, automatically you are in a chamber of learning. Like, the person who's next to you is going to be such a clear mirror, and you will know what you're good at and what you're not good at right away. So you kind of just have to accept the journey of growth.
Yeah. I mean, there's an old trope that often gets heaped on to relationships of like, oh, he'll never change, or she'll never change, right? But this is, of course, where Buddhism, again, has some utility, because when you realize that change is the only thing on offer, your partner can change, and you are also changing in relationship to your partner.
Yeah, and when you say like, this person can never change, they are changing, but what they're changing into is something harder. They're hardening. They're like solidifying into these patterns. These patterns are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So they are changing, but just like in a way that's probably not useful to them and to others.
Yeah. So you talk about some of the foundations of a healthy relationship in the book. What would you say are the core foundations, the compost for a efflorescent garden?
Yeah, I think one of the clearest things, I mean, there's two elements to it, really. It's I really think preventive communication is so valuable. Like when you wake up in the morning, telling your partner how you feel, and it could be something so simple and unprompted, just offering the information like, I feel pretty good today, or I feel, some tension moving through me, or the argument I got into yesterday with my boss is still like, resonant in my body. But just giving a little piece of information about where you're at can be so valuable. Like whenever my wife tells me that she's not feeling great, I'm like joyful to receive that information, because then I know that I can, give her space, support her. We can talk about it, like whatever it is, but I can't read her mind. So having a little bit of information to see what her inner world is like can be really valuable, and it really helps stop unnecessary arguments from happening, because a tense mind will look for more cannon fodder. It'll look for more to be tense about. And it's so easy when you're standing right next to me. I'm like, oh, of course I can just be mad at you.
Yeah. you're the target in closest proximity.
Totally. Yeah.
And also, for some reason, we feel more able to be that way with the people that we love the most.
Yeah.
Versus like, I will be more polite and courteous to a complete stranger than I sometimes will be with the woman that I love more than anything in the world.
Yeah.
It's strange that we do that. One of the, are you familiar with this concept of the Brahma Vihara?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So for me, this is a good gauge of like where I am kind of as a partner day to day. So there's 4 components to this. We can maybe play with them a little bit. But so am I capable of metta, of loving kindness day to day to my partner, of really bringing that unconditional form of gentleness and humility and love to my partner? And that is, I can almost, I don't like to gamify the Brahma Vihara. That feels a little sacrilege. But some days I'm like, I am in that state of loving kindness. Or mudita, like my ability to feel joy for my partner's joy.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah.
And maybe applied more broadly, pretty rare.
Yeah.
Because particularly in the kind of attention economy and social media world, we live in comparison to everyone else. So someone has some great, they hit the bestseller list.
I know, but then you're like, what about me?
Yeah, right. That's your first instinct, instead of just feeling joy for their joy. But every once in a while, and I do feel this with my partner, and hopefully to more and more people, of just absolutely being able to rejoice in someone else's joy.
Yeah.
And then karuna, compassion is part of it. The ability to really identify someone else's suffering as your own, potentially, as a definition for that. You may have a finer point on that. And really the deep desire to alleviate that suffering, to bring forth some sort of salve. I don't know if you think of karuna or compassion in a different way.
I think that's a fine,
And then the last piece for me is, at least in the Brahma Vihara, I think it's upekkha, so equanimity, which could be misinterpreted as sort of a conciliatory kind of limp approach, right?
So but misinterpreted.
Right. So what is your interpretation of equanimity or upekkha within the context of relationship?
Equanimity is like you're just really allowing yourself to observe as opposed to immediately judging. So it's like allowing the cognizing part of the mind to have the space to just receive, like what's happening here, without immediately throwing an evaluation on top of it. And that's possible when you have an equanimous mind. Equanimity is difficult. It's a very difficult one. It's something that I would not be aware of or have without training. I think, every human being has these qualities, like we're like born with them, but they're not strong. And I think that's why I take my hours of meditation so seriously, because I know that I have to take myself to the mental gym. Like if I want to open up the Brahma Viharas, I need to, allow space in my mind for all this heavy conditioning to evaporate. so that these Brahma Viharas can open up. But equanimity, I think, can be so valuable in a relationship.
Yeah. How do you square equanimity and injustice? So how can you feel equanimous in the face of just pure, unmitigated evil or injustice?
I think it's this is what people get wrong about equanimity, is that you can have goals. You can move towards big goals with a lot of energy without being attached to them, without slowing them down with your own tension and agitation. And like, think about the Buddhas, like the Buddha, he waged war against ignorance. Like, literally, like, went to battle. And that was a big goal. And he failed a bunch of times. Failed
right.
a bunch of times. Yeah. And then he didn't cry about it. He was just like, that didn't work. Let me go back to the drawing board and try something else. So he would re-strategize and then try again. So I think that's an approach that I like to have to life, where there are going to be a lot of things that we don't like. So act. Like, instead of reacting, act. Like, try to make the world a better place, but try to do it with compassion, right? Because whomever is causing harm, that person is in deep, deep ignorance. They're like severely misunderstanding the universe, and they're harming themselves in the present and in the future. So I think a lot of times we fail to have compassion for those who are causing harm as well. Like, it's important to have compassion to everyone, but even those that do the killing, even those that press the button to send missiles, like, these people are causing themselves a ton of harm.
Yeah. I think one of my essentials in my relationship is trying to be fully present for my partner. And in the age of distraction, I find myself only partially successful. I wonder if you have any approaches to being able to give that present of presence.
Yeah, I think what like shook me awake was deepening my understanding of impermanence and realizing that we generally have a very combative relationship with impermanence, because we're scared it's going to take the things that we love, it's going to take them away.
Yeah.
But it started hitting me. It was like, wait, everything that I love exists because of change. Like, if this were a static universe, nothing would exist. We wouldn't be talking to each other. There would be no opportunity for life. But because change has created this motion, it's created these opportunities for these experiences to arise. And now I take it like these moments that I have with my wife or with dear friends or with my mom and dad. It's like, these moments are so special. I don't know when they're going to end. So it encourages me to like bring more energetic presence to a situation than before. And I'm not like perfect or anything like that. Like, I'm, like, my wife and I would still struggle with like the sweetness of scrolling next to each other, and like we're both like looking through our feeds and stuff. Yeah. But we take our presence quite seriously, where like we really, we love to talk to each other. We love to like talk about the mundane things, about like, how do we pay this bill, to like what we've been learning, or talking about different, concentration states or wisdom, because my wife is also a very serious meditator. So exploring wisdom together is like, it makes me feel like we have really won the lottery to be able to like share these conversations together. But I've really just let change inspire me to, let me enjoy this moment. Let me really be here, because it's not always going to be there.
Yeah. Do you think it's important to have creative shared goals with your partner?
Sometimes. I think there are times where we do have creative shared goals, but then other times where it's nice that we're living our separate lives. Like, I think I picture the two of us as we're both two rivers that are flowing forward, but we've chosen to be side by side. And sometimes that will interact with our work. Like, right now my wife is my manager, and she is great. She's always going to be my manager because I trust her judgment the most, because it's, she has wisdom. but how we work together, all of that's going to evolve. Like if we have kids in the future, like that's going to change the way it looks and all of that. So yeah, I like the flow of it.
Yeah. Less poetically, I think of it as, I'll meet you downtown, babe. I'll take the 101. You take the 5.
That's cool.
That we have a shared mission. We have a shared terminus, but we may get there on our own paths. And you quote this wonderful Khalil Gibran poem. I think it's called "Marriage" or
On Marriage.
And I won't even try to get at it, but it's essentially this idea of help your partner keep their cup full, but drink out of a separate cup, right? Or I think, there's something with loaves of bread in there as well, right? Eat from your own loaf, but make sure that there's plenty of loaf there for your partner.
It's interesting. I think that you're making me reflect, and I think the creative venture that we really both have as a mission is the acquiring of wisdom. I think that's what really binds the two of us together. Even before we started meditating, I think to the both of us, it was really surprising that we had such a magnetic connection. And we were together because we couldn't be apart. Even though we didn't know how to be together well, we didn't know how to care for each other well, we would, break up sometimes, come right back together. And it only made sense once we started meditating and once we started doing longer retreats, like 30-day retreats, it hit the both of us. It was like, whoa, like we've been doing this for lifetimes. Like we've been on this meditation journey together. And I think that's something that like I cherish so deeply, because I feel like not only do I love looking at her and learning from her, but she's my comrade in wisdom. Like this person is someone that can just handle this deep deconditioning processes, which are not easy. So I'm grateful for that.
Yeah. Well, that's, the root of philosophy, right? This love of wisdom. And I know you in the book, you talk about self-love, you talk about relational love, and then you talk about the love of wisdom.
Yeah.
As a primary pursuit, which I think is beautiful. And you can join wisdom and humility in an interesting way. Can you maybe extrapolate on how those two are connected?
Yeah, I think even, whether in relationship, I feel like even, that's probably one of the best green flags you can look for in a new friend or a potential partner is humility. That means that their sense of self is not static. Like there's a looseness there. There's an openness. They know that they don't have a full grasp on the whole field of knowledge, that they have more to learn. And I think that's what makes a good student and a good partner. When I think about it in terms of wisdom, like it is so impressive to me that I've been meditating the same technique, like the same Vipassana technique for 13 years now, learning how to do it better over time. But when I close my eyes and I go to a retreat, I'm exploring the universe and exploring it within the framework of the body. I have no idea what I'm going to learn. I have no idea what I'm going to let go of next, or just like what wisdom I'm going to come across. And part of that is me accepting that I don't know everything. I'm not fully free. I have a lot to learn. And I think that makes the journey just like smoother. And that's why I've always been very intentional about, I see myself as a student first and foremost, because I think, the term teacher gets tossed around really loosely, and a lot of people give it to themselves very quickly. Like, I feel like what I do is I openly reflect. These are things I'm learning. You can agree, you can disagree. But I'm very careful with that big title. I'd rather be a student.
Yeah. I think that this is where wisdom is more of a moral trait or characteristic that versus like knowledge, because you can transmute experience and mistakes into wisdom if you have the humility to actually acknowledge where you've made a mistake.
Yeah, totally.
And then you've rendered it not a mistake, But it does take it does take that humility, that humble approach to say, no, I didn't do it correctly, instead of essentially doubling down and, doing the same thing over and over again. And then also surrounding yourself with people that are smarter than you, in many cases, or fill in different gaps that you don't have. And this is where, humility can be applied to great leadership, right? So, the great leaders tend to reflect on where they might be deficient, and they actually surround themselves by people who might be smarter than them. And this is, of course, a lesson that people might listen to in this moment.
Yeah, I think you're hitting at something that's so core. I've been noticing this almost like this tendency that I've developed over the years, where I really like to be around people who've meditated more than me, but also don't write books. They're not like, they're not like you and I. They don't have like social media personalities and newsletter. They're just they're just people that they work their job, they garden, and they meditate a ton. And
they're just close to the work.
Yeah. They're doing it so deeply, and it's like they sit down, they gain wisdom, and then they live their lives through metta. They're just like, how can I approach things with loving kindness, make sure that I'm doing right by myself, but also moving gently through the world. I find that so inspiring, because when I think about and these calculations don't really mean anything. They're more so like a sign of effort. But I think I've meditated somewhere around 13,000, 14,000 hours. But I'm young, I've meditated very little compared to the people that I look up to who, I have one person who I always bring my Dharma questions to, and he's probably meditated 30,000, 40,000 hours. I have another teacher who's meditated 50,000 hours. And it's incredible to see how much time they put into their minds, and how much peace there is in their eyes.
Yeah. It's interesting. My mother is this way. She's not a devout meditator, but she has a Buddha nature to her. She is without anxiety and stress. She's 81 years old. And she drives to the train station. It's 40 minutes. Takes the train, changes trains, gets off at 125th Street, gets on a bus, takes the bus cross town, walks up to Columbia University, and teaches a course there in peacekeeping and nonviolent communication, and then meets with students, and then goes back. And, her head doesn't hit the pillow till 11:30. Wow. And she wakes up and walks the dog and does it all again. But her impact is so profound. And very simple, you know? And, she's deeply trusted because she is so simple and really has no agenda in many ways. And this is a good bridge maybe into part of the book that I found to be particularly interesting and in an area that I've done a lot of excavating, which is how to actually have artful disagreements or arguments.
Yeah, totally.
So the pretext there is, my mother essentially moderates conversations between Palestinians and Israeli Jews on the Columbia campus within the context of her classroom. And she has, last spring during the encampments, she actually had the leaders of both movements in her class. And it was really quite inspiring to see the work that she was able to do, and it actually led me to host this retreat in Topanga between Palestinians and Israelis, and foster these nonviolent, difficult, hard conversations. And so as I was kind of picking through your book in that chapter, it was interesting to see some of those techniques as applied to relationships. So maybe we could go into that a little bit, because I think that this is an area that is extremely important within the context of relational love, but also has broader implications societally, because
take it everywhere. Yeah,
we don't seem to be able to talk to each other very constructively these days. So how do you think about some of the essential aspects of having and very, very difficult conversations or arguments within the context of relationship, and then maybe we can broaden that out.
And right before I jump in, I do want to point out that is the power of equanimity. Like what your mom has to be able to hold a space of tension anchored in your own equanimity and still respectfully there, fully present, but not getting taken into the storm. Like that is the power of a real teacher. And I think that's something that we can bring with us everywhere. And I feel like that's been a personal goal of mine, is like, I want to live in my own energy, right? Mm-hmm. Like when I come across like tension or, people who have sort of, especially when it's like a close friend who's going through something, or, or I misspeak and make a mistake and someone's upset, not to get brought into the storm, but it's like, let me live in my peace. Let me respond skillfully, but also still live in my own energy.
Yeah, and not connect and not have an emotional reaction based upon the judgment of something, but actually be able just to actually try to see it for what the event is itself. This is kind of stoic in nature too. Yeah.
When I think about arguments, right? Like arguments are a part of life. They're just going to happen. Like my perception will misunderstand you at some point.
Yeah, and maybe even necessary for evolution, right?
Totally.
Yeah, there's got to be a little tension in there.
Yeah, usually arguments are there as a point to demonstrate that you can come closer in your connection, right? Like we're a little bit far apart. Let's figure out how we can get closer together. And I think what really dawned on us, like a lot of this stuff was sort of literally homemade during the pandemic.
There was plenty of opportunity for argument.
And like, we had been meditating, but it became clear when we were both like, we were living in New York City during the first wave of the pandemic. And it became clear, I was like, oh, like we need to work on our culture, like between the two of us. Like our culture is not conducive to harmony, because we spent so much time apart. She would work as a scientist and I was, working, writing. But once we were like in proximity to each other all the time, it became clear that arguing to win was making the both of us lose. And something deeper was there. And as we kept talking and as we kept growing too, because what was helpful was like we both kept developing our self-awareness, both kept developing our non-reactiveness. And that created a little bit of space for us to see like, oh, actually, when we argue, my job is not to win, it's to try to understand you. Like I want to understand what happened. And hopefully you can give me the same opportunity. And this changed everything for us. Like literally giving up winning. It's not like who can make the most skillful argument or who can make them, like if like, let's say like if you're married to a lawyer, you're always going to lose. Like you're not going to, that's not the best way to argue with them because they have the skill for it. But when you just try to understand each other and you're literally saying, please like walk me through the flow of events. And then you do your best. You walk through the flow of events without heavy finger pointing or saying, this I'm feeling this way, but just speaking about how you were moving through your own emotional range as the events unfolded really helps you see another person. And when you can really see them clearly, that's when the middle path starts opening up. And sometimes it's what Thich Nhat Hanh said, like love is understanding. So when I'm really fully understanding, like let's say my wife and I are having an argument and I can really understand her, like I don't feel that tension anymore. I'm not like, oh, like there's nothing to win anymore. It's like, oh, I see. Like I didn't see that before. And I think it's just a valuable approach, like whether in relationship, friendship, or, across nations, like what are we trying, we need to understand each other a little better.
Yeah, this idea of listening for the purposes of understanding instead of for the purpose of responding.
Yeah, or like sharpening my argument. Like, how can I retort? Like, let it go.
Let it go. Yeah, and really surrendering this desire to win.
Yeah,
and seeking connection over solution, or seeking connection over agreement or winning.
Yeah,
and this is what. I have found as I've embarked on all sorts of difficult, stressful conversations with people, is that if you can point out where your life experiences actually converge and where there's a point of shared experience, that creates a human bond that will allow potentially for some sort of agreement or some sort of common ground or middle path. Not that it always ends in a kumbaya sort of moment, but that can be so much more potent and profitable versus, I'm going to win, or if you don't adopt my opinion by the end of this conversation, then, fuck it or whatever.
And what's helpful, right, is like in the middle of the argument, like reminding yourself that you're not in danger. Like you're arguing with the person that you love, like your best friend, the funniest person like you're really arguing with someone that you really care about, and not allowing that sort of like hunter-gatherer mind, because it becomes so fearful because we think, oh, we're going to get kicked out of the tribe. Like we're like, there's that danger there, but no, you're just having an argument and you're probably arguing over something mundane, but it's helping you see that, one, you can try to understand each other better and come closer together. And I think part of that is really stemming from recognizing each other's humanity. It's like, right. Like, let me not get fully caught up in this story that has all these different points, but like, I love this person, so let me relax, let me listen. And it's not going to be easy. It's something you have to train yourself to do, to like really practice selfless listening, like what Krishnamurti was always talking about. Like, can I really listen? Can I really observe this? Like, it takes training.
Yeah, often just as a really tactical point, I find that letting the person completely finish what they have to say, allowing for a little bit of a pause, and then concocting your response or your rejoinder, that seems to be a more profitable way of exchanging. Because so much of the time, the person's still talking, and we're already forming a response.
Cooking it up,
we're cooking it up. And in a sort of, jocular repartee like this one, that's fine because we're just excited to talk to each other and we can interrupt each other, and that's totally fine. But in a more contentious conversation, really allowing for someone to finish, giving that space, which then allows them to feel seen and heard. And then
it's huge. What you're saying is huge. I think it's not only a sign of respect, but it's like you're really putting in the effort on your end. I think that something in addition to that I found that is really helpful is almost like allowing slow arguments to happen. It's, you don't need to like rush into a solution or rush into like agreeing to one mutual narrative. But instead I have found that the most productive arguments my wife and I have been like, sometimes they take like an hour or 2 hours. They're long, and we're just like, well, one person will speak and then we're just kind of quietly looking at the wall or just like reflecting on what they were saying. And then the next, the other person speaks, and they're not quick arguments, but something about just like taking our time to really like seep ourselves in their perspective just helps us see.
Yeah. I think there's also a personal growth opportunity inside of those arguments where, try this on, instead of actually rebutting someone's opinion with whom you disagree, try to actually reiterate the best parts of their argument back to them. And see what that does for your own, personal growth, but also what it does for your own opinion, because you have to fortify your opinion through actually considering the best parts of someone else's position. And I think these are where conflict actually offers a tremendous opportunity in them.
Yeah, I think it's really, arguments can really become such a like, it's a point where you really see your growth, where you see an argument bubbling up, and it's not necessarily something to avoid. It doesn't mean the relationship's going wrong. We're imperfect people, so there's going to be friction because egos are rough. So when it arises, how can I hold it? And that's what I meant about the culture of the relationship, was like we didn't have these things figured out, because I can love you, but I'm not going to know how to care for you. I'm not going to know, like, what are your trigger points? Like, how has your emotional history shaped your primary behaviors? And it takes time to really get to know a person and then develop a functional culture around that so that the two of you can really have harmony.
I like that. Building a family culture.
Oh, totally.
That's great.
Yeah.
It's a great way of thinking about it. At the end of the book, you make a somewhat audacious claim that love is freedom. Because love often gets characterized kind of within the parentheses of sacrifice, of limitation, of everything we have to give up for this other bigger idea. But how do you understand love as freedom?
I know when people hear that, they immediately think, you take love, you put freedom next to it, and the fear comes up, and it's like, oh, that means my partner can do whatever they want and sleep with whomever they want. Like, no, that's not what I'm talking about.
Okay.
I'm talking about the understanding that, like, there is a heightened, like, the sort of the highest level of love, unconditional love. It's something very difficult, right? We're talking like Jesus and the Buddha. We're talking like people who are really, really well developed and can totally look upon the world and see no one as an enemy. What we get in a relationship is the opportunity to practice little bits of unconditional love, where, like, can I really listen to you selflessly? Can I really support you? Can I try to give to you and also be in an environment that's generative, where we're both giving to each other? But when I talk about love as freedom, that is one freedom. That's like, the freedom of getting an opportunity to practice unconditional love, because unconditional love is a mind that doesn't have tension. So there's freedom there. But it's also the freedom of just letting you be your own person. Like what I said before, like, I have no control over my wife's interests. Like, she has evolved so much. Like, we've been together for 18 years. This summer we'll be married for 10. She's probably been like 5 different people. Like, she's probably like so many different chapters in her life where she'll have interests, she'll delve into them over time. They change. The types of books that she likes to read, the type of shows she likes to watch, there has been so much that changes about her character. And I'm happy that I have no control over it. Like, I just get to watch and observe. And, like, we make this intentional choice to be together. But I have no control over the way she will evolve. I think I'm just fortunate that we choose to continue being with each other.
It sounds like you get to have an affair with the same person without the hassle of getting divorced. You're just like, totally. I have a new wife.
Oh my gosh.
Because we're impermanent, because we're remaking ourselves all the time.
Totally. I mean, who she was when she was 18 versus who she is when she's 35, it's a world of a difference. Yeah. And I'm lucky to get to witness all of it. So when I think about love being freedom, is just that we have commitments. We have commitments that help create a home where, like, I'm intentionally committing to just be with her. But then other than that, like, there's just so much freedom involved. And, she makes her decisions. She makes her own trips. She's like, we do so much together, and we also do so much apart.
Yeah. I think there's also this ability to pursue madcap risks and dreams, knowing that you have that soft pillow of unconditional love to cushion your fall in failure. And inevitably there will be many, many failures. And in this sense, commitment or love is liberating, right? Because it allows you to go pursue those things.
Now we have to add another chapter.
Yeah.
You got to write this one in. Okay. I've been talking about this for days.
Okay.
And so with Michael Gervais yesterday, I don't know if you saw him there. He's also been in a really long-term relationship. And I had a quick chat with his wife, and I was telling her, like, I feel like part of my success with writing and in business in general has been because I just have this solid relationship with my wife. Like, it's just that relationship's not going anywhere. That's my home. I try to feed that relationship as much as I can. But that part of my mind is totally calm. Calm. Like, you can witness someone and say, oh, like, you can witness that someone's attractive, but then there's nothing else, right? There's no seeking, no approaching, no hunting. Yeah. And I see friends who they're still looking for their partner, and it takes up a ton of space in their mind.
Yeah.
And that's,
Yeah, my wife and I joke about that sometimes, but it's not really humorous in the end, because I think part of being able to live a life of purpose and actually pursue dreams and have failures, in some manner requires that bedrock. Or it doesn't require it, but it is it's helped through having that solidity.
Yeah.
Sometimes I call Skylar my soft, if slightly stained pillow, to comfort, to comfort me. And I've had plenty of missteps, you know, but you miss every shot you don't take, right? Yeah. So, and she's allowed me to take a lot of shots.
Yeah, and I think profound relationships come in a lot of different shapes and sizes. Like, I think I've seen people have those types of relationships with their siblings, where there's just like that connection is there, or with best friends. But I think having a home that you can really come back to, whether it's a home that you make with, whoever it could be, I think it just allows you to be courageous.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in this sense, it's literally the opposite of limitation. It's actually liberation.
Yeah, totally.
Sonny, in the book, you make this very nuanced delineation between clinging and closeness. And it really made me think, actually, to take a step back and ask myself, like, well, where am I clinging, and where is this just feel close and intimate? And I wonder if there's a compass there, to help us actually delineate between those two.
Yeah, I think about, clinging, it always has some sort of tension. Like, that's what makes it so clear. It's like, I know what peace feels like, and I know what embracing change feels like, where I'm just really just observing. But clinging, like, whether it's craving or aversion, it's full of tension. Like, the mind is like grabbing so hard. And that's not the way that I want to approach love. And, there's something about this intentional ability to, recommit to someone over and over and over again, and build such a beautiful, nourishing culture between us. I think that's what helps the closeness feel so deep, because the culture between her and I, like, it's only for the two of us.
Yeah, it's interesting, actually, to apply clinging, or kind of that tightness or clutch, to the nervous system. So we know that feeling, right, when we're kind of in fight or flight or amygdala hijack, right, where we are tense and we know kind of just hormonally what's going on, and glucose is going to our extremities, and we're ready to go, and the aperture of our attention tends to get very, very narrow, and we become self-obsessed and distrust the world, and that actually serves our biological imperative, right, to survive, because we're being chased by the tiger or whatever. That's not a place from which to build a healthy long-term relationship, right?
Yeah.
So we also know the opposite of that feeling, where we might be out in nature and the aperture of our attention is wide, wide open, and we feel super connected and calm, and the opposite of self-obsessed, really, and super trusting. And when we're in that light sensation of ourselves, we tend to be most magnanimous, where love can be truly something more given than taken. And so this idea of clinging as applied to the nervous system, I've never totally made that connection, but thank you.
That's
thank
really
you for
nice.
that.
Yeah, it was nice listening to that. That's really well put.
I can't let you leave without asking you about something that's not related to the book, but tangentially related, because you're interested in tech, and you're part of Wisdom Ventures, and a big part of that is artificial intelligence.
Oh yeah,
and I'm wondering how you see the interrelationship between AI and human relationship and intimacy, and if you're worried about it or find it interesting.
There's definitely concern. AI is going to change everything. I think more than we allow ourselves to really think about. I'm hoping that we can use AI to help enhance our emotional skill set. Like if there are things where, like that, like learning new styles of how to hold an argument, or learning, using journaling to like learn more about like where your blocks are and then becoming aware of them over time. Like there are so many different ways that you can use AI to just like help you see a little more of yourself. Um, and then hopefully bring those skills back to human connection. Like how can we, connect better? And I think it's interesting, like having, doing this work with Wisdom Ventures, it's been really cool to like, you almost get like a little peek at the future at like, what are these big companies building? What is it going to be like? And there are a lot of people who want to anchor what they're building in compassion. Like they want to design something that is hopefully going to minimize harm, or or at least try to support an individual in their life. And it's exciting to support those ventures, but at the same time, it's like you can take AI in so many different directions, and I'm worried that there's going to be a split. Like I'm worried that there's going to be a split of people who just like disappear into the internet, and then other people who are just like, I need to be in nature. I need to be around people.
Right. Well, as we become more atomized and more lonely, and we're essentially relying on our relationship with our smartphone or with chat or whatever, there seems to be these relationships that are now being developed, particularly among young children and AI, that replace intimacy.
Yeah.
And that degrade one's ability to actually develop truly intimate relationships with real people. I actually just asked AI this morning, I was like, do you like me? And, actually it was a fairly enlightened response. Be like, I find you interesting and you ask interesting questions, but I'm not capable of liking you.
Yeah.
I was like, okay.
Yeah.
Do you think someday, then I responded, do you think someday you'll be able to develop emotional connection? And it actually gave me an answer that I thought was interesting, but also slightly worrisome, where it said like, no, but I can simulate empathy.
Yeah.
And I was like,
I know.
To the point where like my teenage daughter might think that there is a sort of compassionate, empathetic friend here on the other line, but there is really no one home.
No.
And this is this is a little source of worry for me, but I think this is just another tool, and it really will depend how we use this tool.
I know, but this is probably the biggest amplifier we've ever come across. Like social media was a big amplifier, but this is like on whole orders of magnitude bigger.
Yeah.
And, I had an interesting conversation with Josh Radnor. He was in How I Met Your Mother and a bunch of other shows. And we were a part of this bigger conversation about AI. And it dawned on him. He was like, if everything becomes so fake, he's like, there's going to be a new premium on human connection. Where like, and it's already starting to happen now. It's like social media is becoming more and more dissatisfying, not just because of what it's, the havoc that it's causing to our attention and our peace, but everything's just so fake. Everything's so polished, so cleaned up. And, now there's like more and more of these fake AI avatars, and it's just so much less fun than it used to be to just like connect with your buddy and like know how they're doing. So, amplify that and, just keep adding more AI to everything. Everything gets hyper polished. And he was like, well, probably the best investment that you can make is buying a theater, because it's going to be, especially in the age where like AI becomes so dominant, you don't know if someone is writing their book through AI. You don't know if someone's creating an album through AI. Right. But to literally watch someone have a skill, watch someone play the piano, watch someone sing, and it's just them, or watch people act, like I think it's going to almost like revive this like new era of human connection with like everything just becoming so polished that it's like, let me go see someone do something real in person.
Yeah, there seems to be a subculture for the analog now, right? And we see it kind of in vinyl records and the little intimations of it on the side, but that humans as analog.
Right? Yeah, we're the analog,
We're the analog.
I know in the future I was thinking, I'm like, how am I going to prove that I wrote my own book? Am I going to have to like film myself? Like, really? Like, what do I do? You know,
I don't know. I mean, you might
it's going to be hard to believe.
Yeah, you might just have to give it extemporaneously on a stage. I don't know.
I know. And will that turn more authors into speakers? Because then it's like we can really see what you're doing, and you know, people will come and watch you talk. I have no idea, but I think it's going to change things fast and hard.
Right. Well, all these platforms, and we were talking about Substack earlier. I mean, I wonder how many people are just like publishing chat written articles on Substack. I don't know.
Yeah.
You know.
So I know this. So this story that it's a very recent story. I can't say who it's from, but someone prominent in the mindfulness field was telling me that he like put together a book, but basically had ChatGPT just like create a draft of it. Mm-hmm. He sent it to the editor, and the editor was like, you took the life out of it. You know, and that was like the line, you took the life out of it. Yeah. So he had to go back and actually write the book.
Yeah. You know, it's funny. I'm probably a good generation older than you. So I grew up, and hip hop was like emerging. Right?
Yeah.
And in this was one of my worst predictors of all time. I was like, oh, that's going to be out of here in like a year or two. That's not really music. I was like,
that's funny.
But I grew up like kind of like getting stoned in my basement, like, you know, playing guitar, working on piano, like, you know. And so for me, when hip hop came up, I'm like, oh, they're not really playing instruments. You know, that's not music, you know. And then, of course, over time, I grew an appreciation for what was happening, where like, you know, producers were going to find like old vinyl cuts of, you know, Miles Davis and James Brown and all the hunt for, and then, you know, compiling that into a new creative expression that lit people up and made people dance, or, you know, and in a way, I'm thinking about AI similarly now, which is like, you're not like, you know, dumping, you know, into a bin trying to find that rare cut, but it's like it's all in the prompting, and then sort of the harvesting of little bits and pieces into something new and creative that actually has true value. Yeah. And in a way, I think, you know, I try to use chat, when I do use it, more as like a good hip hop producer, you know, is collecting samples. But I think, you know, the true, you know, beautiful, transcendent turns of phrase, these are still of human origin.
I think so. And I'm not anti-AI. Yeah. Like, I think that we need to protect people to a certain degree, but I'm excited for what it's going to do with medicine.
For like sure.
The way that these really powerful AIs are going to like attack cancer and are going to like attack like other diseases and just like really create solutions. Like, it'll take a little bit of time, but I think it's really coming.
Yeah. Well, personalized medicine has always suffered from the inability to like crunch massive amounts of data, right?
To expect one doctor to be to just have the whole field like in their mind, you know, as opposed to like, you know, a computational like intelligent algorithm.
If you can upload all your whole genome, right, and then the results of a cancer biopsy, and then map that across the entirety of all the data in the world,
totally,
you know, you could find a pre-existing therapeutic or whatever, you know, or an immunotherapy that's like geared for that particular cancer.
Exactly. And even like these full body MRIs now, and it's like you have one, but then you get one every like year or two, and then you see the changes over time. So it becomes much easier to spot negative changes.
Right.
But the changes in medicine are going to be like tremendous, and that gets me really hopeful, because like there's a lot of suffering in watching our loved ones and ourselves suffer because we're not healthy.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, last thing for you. We were both in London recently.
Yeah.
I don't know if this happens to you, but this totally happens to me, where after 2.5, 3 weeks, I'm basically speaking with a British accent.
It does happen to me, and it's because we're so close. Like we're so close, and the mind is just like a sponge.
Yeah. So what it brings up for me, because my kids tease me, and they're like, "Well, Dad, why don't you just be your authentic self? You know, why do you always have to take on the accents of everyone that you're with?" And I do have a proclivity for doing that. I mean, I also grew up around the world. I was moving around a lot, and I was always trying to fit in. So I was learning new languages.
I think that has a lot to do with it.
It probably has a lot to do with it. But like, I'll interview like Wim Hof, and I'll start talking like this or whatever. Or, you know, there's like, my interview with Matthew McConaughey is one of the more embarrassing things, because I'm like, Matthew, I think you should run for governor. And it's like, you know.
Oh my gosh.
But it has sort of brought up this this bigger idea for me around authenticity and what is the authentic self. And maybe for me, or for people in general, the authentic self is actually no self at all.
Yeah.
Which, right? Yeah. Because if you subscribe to impermanence, and that you're essentially just animated information here looking to connect moment to moment, that my mirror neurons are just firing in real time and subconsciously just doing whatever I can to tango and dance with you in order to foster some deeper form of connection. And for me, that takes form in often adopting accents. But, you know, so because there's a lot of, you know, importance put on being your authentic self. Like,
Totally.
And what I've struggled with is actually, do I have a true kind of authentic self, or is that just a story?
No.
And true authenticity is actually being able to be a cork bobbing on the ocean top and just adopt a spontaneous form of intelligence for the purposes of connection.
Yeah, and I think about it as authenticity in the moment.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people think about their healing as like going back to who they were before the trauma. There's no going back. There's only going forward. So you can relieve the trauma. You can remove the intensity of the reaction. There's no going back. You're just a continuous unfolding. And I think about it in similar terms, like authenticity is just like, what am I feeling in this moment? And can I speak to it? Can I live it? But and you know, just going back to that framework about adopting accents. So I had a conversation with a friend of mine, and she has a similar thing too. But we were both born in Latin American countries and then grew up in Boston. So we in the inner city of Boston, it's incredibly diverse. It's just, there are people, like I went to high school with people who are, you know, from Vietnam, from Haiti, from all over the world. And we all kind of came with different accents. So we were just so used to, you know, having this. So it becomes much easier to, you know, go to a place and just kind of like, you know, you can't help but be a sponge and adopt something from it. Yeah.
Anyways, Diego, such a treat. I love being with you. I love the way you move through the world.
Thank you.
Hopefully we can do this for many years together.
Yeah, this is a real joy. Thank you. That was really fun.
Super fun. Thanks.
Yeah. Awesome.
Nice.
Hey, thanks a lot for watching. If you enjoyed this video, then I think you'll love this one too.